On Friday, the 23rd of June 1972, I went to the Royal Botanic Garden in Edinburgh in the early afternoon. It was Midsummer Eve, an important day for the nature spirits. A dull day, but there were blinks of sunshine. I came into the garden from Inverleith Row by the east gate and took the path to the left, leading to the rock garden. I stopped to look at a horse chestnut, which has always fascinated me because of the strange markings on the bark, which look like hieroglyphics or ancient native carvings. I'm sure they mean something, but so far I have not been able to decipher them. A little beyond this tree I left the path and went up the grassy slope to go on through the heath garden, which was suddenly alive with nature spirits. Green elves 3 to 4 feet tall were walking in front of me, full of joy and delight, and little gnomes were running about almost under my feet. Cormos came towards me from amongst the bushes, still the beautiful little fawn who was my first contact with these beings. He greeted me with joy and, turning, danced off in front of me between the elves. Pan was with me, very powerful on my left, as I walked on to the top of the heath garden, towards the tree of life. This tree, Zelkova carpinifolia, referred to as the tree of life by Richards and Barb Baker, the men of the trees, is a strange tree, which I like to greet when I go to the garden. Even this specimen, which is not large, has a powerful field. I walked round it clockwise, and then stood looking at a part of the bark just below the level of my head. My attention was caught by a group of markings on the bark that were in the form of a figure about 14 inches high. I'd often looked at this tree, but had never seen this effect before. The figure was distinct. It was strange and slightly sinister, a fawn-like being with longish straight horns. The eyes were quite noticeable. I had been aware of the tree spirit, but had never seen it before. Was this a representation of it on the bark? A slight mist formed between me and the tree, and I found myself looking at the entity itself, standing in front of the tree. He was about my own height, thick-set and dark-skinned. His eyes, which were fierce, challenged me. Afraid? No. Would you have felt so drawn to my tree if you had seen me before? Yes, I think so. Will you touch the tree as you have always done, aware this time that you are doing it through me? I laid my hand on the trunk of the tree and felt the usual strong flow of energy. Will you lean your back against the tree again through me? I did so, and was aware of a strange, warming energy. You find me odd, not what you expected. You are not repulsed? I'm disconcerted. You certainly are not what I expected, but I love this tree, and you are the tree. You are not evil. I am neither good nor evil. My tree has been called the tree of life. I am what you make of me. I moved away from the tree and turned round. I was aware of the tree spirit standing against the trunk where I had been leaning, strong, powerful, and strange. In spite of his appearance, I felt activation of the heart centre. Pan was again beside me. He had moved away from me as I approached the tree. You are developing in the right direction, he said, smiling. More and more easily you are able to accept the strange looking of my subjects with discernment, being aware of the true quality of the elemental, and not put off by the apparently sinister aspect, able instead to feel love and respect. I have always felt a special attraction for this tree ever since I first came across it some years ago. When I lean against the trunk, I draw much energy from it. Seeing this aspect of the tree spirit has made no difference? No. The energy field of the tree is unchanged. I looked at Pan inquiringly. You said this aspect of the tree spirit, meaning he has others? Yes, he has others. The form in which he shows himself is suited to the occasion. It has a purpose, to test my reaction, or to disconcert me. Pan smiled. Perhaps a bit of both. Your reaction was good. Where do you want to go next? I indicated a path that skirts the south side of the rock garden and proceeded along it. Cormos and the elves were still ahead of us in the distance. Most of the clouds had dispersed, and the sun was shining, and I felt great happiness. Some distance ahead, where the path is bordered by bushes and trees, there was an empty seat. But before sitting down, I decided to visit the redwood trees, which I love so much. There are 6 or 7 of them, arranged in a rough circle. These trees radiate a quite different kind of energy than any other tree. They are young trees, not yet very large, but they are beautiful. Kulmos and the elves had disappeared, and Pan was no longer with me. A seat near the trees was occupied by a man reading a paper, and a long-haired youth was sitting on the ground near a border sketching flowers. I couldn't very well embrace the trees as I would have liked to have done, or even talk to them except mentally. I walked round them and then stood for a few moments in the centre of the circle, before returning to the empty seat I had seen. It was, of course, now occupied. Obviously not the right place for me. As I turned towards another path, which curved round a rhododendron bush, Kormos came running out of it and beckoned. He turned, and I followed him along the curving path to an empty seat. The path was narrow, and I felt enclosed by trees and bushes and very close to nature. I watched 2 bullfinches in the bush opposite. Some sparrows came twittering down onto the path, hoping perhaps for breadcrumbs. A blackbird was hopping about almost in front of me, and a squirrel dashed across the path and climbed about a yard up a tree trunk, disappearing round the back of it. It must have jumped into a bush close by, as I could see its tail, which remained motionless for some time. Then the tail disappeared with a flick, and the squirrel came out from under another bush, onto the edge of the path. It sat up, looking at me, came a few feet towards me, and then turning, scampered off. Kormos, who had been standing in the middle of the path watching, came and sat beside me. "This reminds me of our first meeting," I said, "when you asked me, 'Why are human beings so stupid?'" Kormos looked up at me with a mischievous grin. "You can't answer that question, can you?" "No, I can't. Since I have come to see the human race through the eyes of beings like yourself, I sometimes wonder how you can put up with us at all. We find human behavior amusing at times, but so often it is destructive, cruel, and horrible, or so it seems to us. It makes us sad. We try to understand, but it isn't easy. We know there are those who love nature, who love this garden, and find happiness and peace amongst the flowers, bushes, and trees, who love the birds and the squirrels, and feed them with crumbs and nuts. No doubt they would love us if they could see us. This makes us happy, and we draw near to them. Some of them may even be aware of us, though they cannot see us. Why can you see us so clearly? I suppose I am a privileged person, one of those chosen to link with Pan and help to renew the old contact between mankind and the nature spirits. Pan appeared at that moment standing opposite us. You were chosen because you are suited to the task. Your entire life has been a training and preparation for this, and for other things. As soon as the integration between your lower self and your higher self reached a certain degree of completion, you were bound to see us. Your lower self and your physical body had to be trained and conditioned for many years before this level could be reached. To see and communicate with us in the way you do requires just as much training as the skilled brain surgeon or virtuoso musician. You know well how long it has taken, and we are speaking only of this life. Kulmas looked at me. Now I understand, he said. He rose and turned to Pan, who placed his hand on the little fawn's head and looked down at him with infinite affection in his eyes. You too were chosen for the part you played in bringing about our meeting, my little henchman. A slow, beatific smile spread over the fawn's face. He appeared to grow in stature. He gave a cry, spun round and went dancing down the path. Pan looked after him smiling, then crossed and sat beside me. Your work must have its problems. Yes, many problems. Mainly interesting ones, often amusing, sometimes disconcerting. Now that I accept the fact that what is happening is real, I am becoming used to the problems. There was a time when I doubted, when it seemed to me that the whole thing might be a fantasy, projections from my own unconscious. But to think of you as a projection of a constellated part of my own unconscious, or as a secondary personality, as the clever, all-knowing psychologist might maintain, seems to me totally ridiculous. Are you sure? Yes, I am sure. A great being like yourself could never be part of my unconscious. Pan looked at me with a curious smile, a smile I knew well. Have you never felt that I was within you? Oh, yes. There were the times when you walked into me as you did on the mile walk at Ettingham, and I saw the outside world through your eyes. Would you say I possessed you? No, it was not possession, which usually implies something unpleasant or evil. It was identification, a kind of integration which is quite different from possession. Apart from those times, have you never felt that I was somehow within you? Yes, of course I have. I looked at him. Now I understand what you mean. We are told to turn within, to seek God within, to seek Christ within. But this withinness is not contained in my physical body, which would limit it. It is in all dimensions of space and time. It is infinite. It is the eternal now. We turn away from the outside world, the material world, which so many believe to be the only reality, to seek that other reality, the true reality which is within, and yet is everywhere. Pan, by his questions, had released a deep inner knowledge from my unconscious mind, where it had been stored. It was now flowing out in a way that surprised myself. In that sense, of course, I continued, you are within me. The whole universe is within me, the elemental kingdom, the angelic hierarchy. Christ is within me. God himself is within me. This withinness is the all, the great mystery which we poor humans cannot hope to understand completely. We can only grope towards it, and in some way seek to apprehend it. If we believe it is possible to do this, we will find what we seek, at least a facet of the ultimate truth. Pan placed his hand on my arm. Looked at in one way, your clever, all-knowing psychologist is right. I am within you, but the projection is unnecessary. To turn within in the right way and center oneself on the cosmic Christ is to develop cosmic consciousness and bring about integration between the lower and higher selves. When a certain degree of this development has been reached, and you turn without, to the contemplation of the material world through the medium of the physical senses, you see it in a different way, because you are now aware of and in touch with the true reality behind it. Because of the ray you are on and the work you have to do, you see me and my subjects as if we were part of the material world. This is not projection. It is bringing cosmic reality into manifestation when it is right to do so. For of course you do not see us as part of the material world all the time. That would be too much. Your physical body could not take it, and it would lead to confusion. It happens for a reason, when it is necessary, and will increase your understanding of the elemental kingdom. In which case your sensitivity is stepped up to bring it about, and one or more of us will become visible to you as required. Only on rare occasions, like the one on the mile walk at Ettingham, where you say, "I stepped into you," do you see the lot, or at least as much of it as you can take. Pan looked at me with a twinkle. "Can you explain the mechanism?" I asked. "I'm certain it is not due to heightened sensitivity of physical sight only." "It is a mixture of that, plus an added higher vision brought about by the development of cosmic consciousness." "That makes sense to me. But I am unable to control it myself. For instance, I cannot wish to see a nature spirit and immediately do so, however hard I try. It is done from our side, when it is right for you to have the heightened vision, or when a particular entity wishes to become visible to you." "How is it done?" Pan laughed and shrugged his shoulders. "There you go again with your questions." "How else can I find out? I want to know. That is, if it is possible to explain to a three-dimensional mortal who can use only a small part of his brain." "All right. I'll do my best by an analogy. Imagine a theatre with a large stage." "A theatre? My dear Pan, what do you, the god of the elemental world, know about man's places of entertainment?" "All that's necessary. Remember, I am everywhere. Have you forgotten the time when I sat in the empty seat beside you at a performance of Midsummer Night's Dream at the Edinburgh Festival?" I laughed delightedly. "I have not. You liked the little Welshman's puck. It was acceptable. But to return to my analogy which you interrupted. The stage is in darkness. It is thronged with people, but you cannot see them because of the darkness, which symbolizes your lack of sensitivity. A narrow-beam spotlight picks out one of them, and he immediately becomes visible to you. Any number of different individuals can be picked out and become visible in this way. Similarly, lights could pick out a group, or the whole stage could be lit. The light symbolizes your heightened senses. It is a rough analogy, but it may answer your question. It does. The lights are controlled by some being on your side, I take it. Yes. Therefore, I can't select the entities I am to see or when. But I am aware of and can communicate with your subjects. Of course, you can do this at any time, though you may only be able to see us on special occasions. The moment you think of an entity, you are in immediate communication with it. You may or may not be aware of the response according to your degree of sensitivity at the time, but it will almost certainly be there. Can anyone make such a contact? Yes, anyone can, and it is important that this should be understood. The one-way contact is always there, but being aware of the response usually needs training, or at least practice. It is very subtle and easily missed. What saddens me is when others are envious of the gift I have been given. Why was I chosen? Why not them? It isn't fair. Fortunately, there are not many. But there are many who would genuinely and sincerely like to share my experiences, and I'm frequently asked how they can set about it. And you hedge and say someday you probably will if your faith is strong enough. Don't try too hard, it will just happen at the unexpected moment. I laughed. No doubt you've heard me at it. I certainly have, and it is sound advice. You also tell them to follow your example and live in comparative isolation in the country for 10 years, as you did yourself. I do. And most of them look aghast and say they could not possibly do that. They haven't the time. And it might mean giving up too much. There are people who want the easy way every time. How to see fairies in 6 simple lessons. There is always time for the important things. Communicating with my subjects is not a garden game for the odd half hour when there is nothing better to do. It is of vital importance for the survival of mankind. Unless man comes to realize the dangerous stupidity of outraging nature and stops the ever-increasing rate of pollution, he will ultimately destroy himself. Seeking cooperation between the 3 kingdoms, the Davic, the nature, and man's, as is a name at Findhorn, is one way of helping mankind to survive. In your case, if you had not spent those years at Cowfoot Cottage, you would never have seen either me or any of my subjects. It was a basic necessity. Another question that arises in the desire to communicate with elemental beings is the motive behind it. Curiosity is an important quality when it is the right sort of curiosity, such as seeking after truth. There is another kind, idle curiosity, wanting to know what is going on, not to find out truth or useful information, but just to probe. How nice it would be to be able to see lots and lots of harmless little fairies and dear little gnomes dancing about in the garden. Of course, they have very little power, but they are such fun, dear little pets that don't need any looking after. Pan seemed to swell in size, and the power radiating from him stepped up. I have observed far too much of this contemptuous, superior attitude of man towards my subjects. It is almost worse than disbelief. The smallest of them has more potential power than the strongest human being. It is lucky for mankind that we are infinitely tolerant and understanding, and that we obey God's will. If we used a fraction of the power we have, we could wipe the whole of mankind off the face of the earth. We are not here to be the slaves of man, but to collaborate with him to bring about a world of peace, cooperation, and brotherly love. A world free from wars and violence. Man's disbelief in our existence does not destroy us. It can never do that. We are here, and we shall always be here, even if man destroys himself and his material planet. Man is losing his dominion over the other kingdoms with which he shares the earth, by his destructive behavior, selfishness, and stupidity. It is time he looked and saw what he is doing. He must face up to the consequences of his behavior, which he cannot escape. If he does not, a time will come when only actions will teach him the necessary lessons. By then, it may be too late. I drew a deep breath. My dear Pan, your power is terrifying. You've almost blasted me out of existence. His stern face relaxed into a smile. I'm sorry. I certainly have no wish to do that. Even I sometimes get carried away by anger. Let's leave it at that, and return to the genuine people who are legitimately curious about my world and would dearly love to see us. There is nothing wrong with that, except that it very rarely works. They try too hard. Perhaps this is fortunate, as they do not realize how dangerous it might be if their desire was granted too soon, before either their bodies or their minds had been prepared and conditioned for the experience, and the right degree of cosmic consciousness had been reached. The elementals, the ones who are my subjects, belong to a different evolutionary stream than man. Close contact between human beings and the elementals can be dangerous if it takes place too soon, especially if the motives for seeking it are wrong. My subjects are strange beings, as you well know. But really close links are only necessary with those who have special work to do. Many people who believe in the nature spirits and love them can be aware of them, can communicate, and sometimes even see them in brief glimpses. With such people, they will always cooperate when invoked, which simply means asking for help. This simple awareness is open to anyone who seeks it. It is the complete, total link that must be initiated from our side when it is required. What would happen to an unprepared person who tried to make the close link, or to someone with the wrong motives? Such a link is easily enough made, but it would be on the wrong level, with the wrong type of being, probably on the lower astral plane. Tell me more about this. So far, we have been talking about the pure elementals, whose basic light bodies are vortices of energy, which I believe to belong to the angelic hierarchy, and who take on etheric bodies formed of substance drawn from the etheric shell of the earth in order to carry out their functions. These are the bodies that become personified as elves, fauns, fire elementals, air and water spirits, and so on, such as are preserved as thought forms in man's myths and legends. As well as these, I know that there are other entities of a different type, which I have referred to as pseudo-elementals. You certainly know that they exist, as you can both see and communicate with them, and have sometimes had to deal with them. Goblins, the black sort, imps, and a whole collection of nightmare horrors we need not go into. They are not your subjects, then? Pan gave me a look of mock horror. Certainly not. I wouldn't acknowledge them. Do they have a god, or a leader of some sort? Pan sighed. Yes, unfortunately. My opposite. Call him Anti-Pan, if you like, though it sounds odd. Everything about him is odd. You might regard him as a debased aspect of myself, a detached shadow. Oh, we are quite good friends in a way, as he has a necessary part to play. I keep him at arm's length. Is he at all like you? Well, yes, in a debased sort of way. His horns are longer and vicious-looking. He has real goat's legs and coarse hair. He smells of goat. He is the real nymph-chasing satyr, the goat god, the true model for the devil. He is very earthy. Unfortunately, too many people take him for me. That is the reason for the bad reputation I have in some quarters. Is it easy to contact him? Too easy. Invoke him with the right noises, and he'll be there, masquerading as me. What can you do about it? more than you think, but I usually leave it unless he goes too far. The fools who invoke him deserve what's coming to them. But do they know what they're doing? Not always. But the truth comes to the surface in the end. There is too much negative energy involved. It shows. The balance is invariably upset and brings about consequences that cannot be ignored. What sort of people can invoke him? All sorts. Very often beautiful people with the highest ideals and good intentions, but they are earth-oriented and have some kind of negative quality about them. Their cosmic consciousness is not highly developed, if at all. Is he evil? Not necessarily. That depends on how he is invoked and by whom. He is a negative entity who brings negative energies with him. As I said, he has a role to play, but that's enough. I don't like talking about him. And on that last word, Pan withdrew. That is to say, he disappeared from my sight. I spent some time walking about the botanic garden, thinking over our conversation, and then I went home.